YouTube channel of IIM Calcutta Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation. I am Professor Balram Avitatur of the Operations Management Group and a member of the CAI. It's our pleasure to have Mr. Bhavesh Manglani today as our esteemed speaker. Bhavesh is a co-founder of Delhivery. Founded in 2011, Delhivery's vision is to become the operating system for commerce in India through a combination of world-class infrastructure, logistics operations of the highest quality and cutting-edge engineering and technology capabilities. He had stints in RCom and Idea Cellular in product roles before moving to Delhivery. As COO, Bhavesh contributed to building the operations team and supply chain infrastructure at Delhivery. He mentors and invests in early-stage startups. A techno-optimist, he is passionate about using technology to solve societal problems. He is a signatory to the Founders Pledge. In his spare time, he enjoys being a dad. Bhavesh is from the 2008 MBA batch of IIM Calcutta and a BTech from DAIICT Gandhinagar, 2006. So we will start the interview now, Bhavesh. Bhavesh, welcome back once again. So could you briefly describe your journey from graduating from IIM Calcutta to becoming a founder at Delhivery? How did the idea of Delhivery come about? How did the founders come up with the logistics model?
Thank you, sir. Thank you for having me over. It's always a pleasure to reconnect with my roots. 2 years at Joka had given me a flavor of finance, systems, operations, marketing, strategy. And I had come to Joka fresh out of undergrad. So this was always a choice, what domain to go after. And somewhere I was very keen to look at a systems role to try and work in technology. RCom was the only place where they had offered me a role initially in tech. And that's why from campus, I went to RCom in Bombay at the head office. However, I started in a product role, but it was actually a good misfortune to have because I got to see scale from a very high level. And my first manager was also an alumni from 1998 batch. So he made sure that I got the best possible exposure. I from day one, I hit the ground running. I mean, essentially, I was learning new tools and new techniques at the same time, building things which were going live almost on a daily basis, while also learning organizational dynamics. I think, that's one of the few courses that we tend to, at least as a fresher, we tend to not really understand or appreciate as much until you actually work in a large company. After that, I moved closer to home with Idea Cellular, where again, I was able to drive a small team to scale revenue rapidly using data quite extensively. However, in both my corporate stints, this was in the first 3 years after campus, the one thing I learned was how to move the needle at a large workplace. But I was also fundamentally dissatisfied with the adoption of technology. I think the goal in most of these places was that we should continue to grow at double digits, and that is good enough, right? I think the focus on innovation in some places was good, but it was always in a narrow domain or with a couple of leaders. So somewhere I had this itch, where I wanted to set up a business of my own, and I had been looking at various different business models. This was the early days of Android and the Play and the App Store coming in, and I think the way everybody was looking at technology was to use basic databases, basic web systems to go in and transform traditional businesses. So I was looking at a hyperlocal model in Navi Mumbai while working in my regular day jobs. When I got a call from Sahil, who's the CEO of Delhivery today, and has been since the beginning. We had exchanged numbers in 2009, and 2 years later, I got a call saying that, "Hey, dude, I'm starting a company. Would you be interested in coming on board as a CTO?" So obviously, CTO was a little far-fetched, but I said, I'm coming to Gurgaon. I'll come and meet you guys. And somewhere, sitting at a dhaba, talking about the DAIICT algorithm, the Hamiltonian, traveling salesman problem, there was an instant connect. We had the same level of crazy across all the 5 founders. And I was looking at a couple of other opportunities which were more like a early stage employee at a mid-sized startup. But this somehow felt like the right decision, and I just took the plunge. And I think it's been a crazy ride since. Uh, Having studied case studies, read books on the growth of semiconductor, internet, e-commerce, during my time at Joka as well as during my undergrad, I saw an opportunity to transform industry using technology to automate processes and data to track all the numerous signals that businesses generate. Right? Earlier tracking of if I want to track 1,000 different data points on a daily basis, it wasn't possible, say, a few years before when we started Delhivery. Also, somewhere all 5 of us, we thought that we are good at building things in the back end. We weren't really front end people, and so it we saw ourselves as the tool makers of the gold rush. So if you go back to the California gold rush, some people who struck gold made money. People who did not strike gold ended up going perhaps bankrupt or leaving California wherever they came from. However, the people who continued to make money through the process was the people who built the tools for mining gold. And we saw that a number of startups were getting funded on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to build either horizontal e-commerce plays or niche e-commerce plays, but nobody was building the infrastructure for all of these companies to build the customer experience that they were gunning for, right? And that's how we thought that building the back end, both warehousing and transportation, would be a great opportunity and would also along the way create value. I think the because none of us was very we were not looking to do something big. The goal was always to do something fun, cutting edge, and keep applying as much engineering and as much first principle thought process that we could to the problem. I mean, we came up with the name Delhivery because we thought that for the first 5 years we will only be delivering in the city of Delhi NCR. So I think broadly that's how we came about the whole idea. Talking about the model, we started with transportation as the first business line. This was obviously the bigger problem that the companies of those days were facing, simply because the likes of Blue Dart, RMX, and the other transportation players at the time, they would take at least 48 to 72 hours to deliver within the same city because of the hub and spoke model. And we said that, and also when they were doing cash on delivery, which was the initial plug to convince a customer, uh, the money would come back to the merchant more than a month later. And for a early stage, for a small e-commerce merchant, this was a deal breaker because that's a lot of money getting stuck in working capital. Uh, and we said that if I'm collecting the money today, I deposit in the bank tomorrow. If I can reconcile this within the 24 hours, I can give you the money back in T+2. So there is no reason why we need to hold on to this money, right? And the companies were generally thinking of the float that they could earn, and that is probably why they were not remitting this in time. So these two opportunities, speed to drive and COD, were the two initial levers through which we started delivering within Delhi NCR. And our clients would come back saying that our volumes have gone up 3x in the pin codes you are delivering within a week, within 2 weeks. What are you guys doing different? And all we told them was, look, from the time we pick up the parcels, we try and deliver them within 8 to 12 hours. And that became an initial hook to get clients in. Over time, obviously, as the industry evolved, larger parcels required more complex fleet. Then once we started intercity, we also slowly graduated to a hybrid hub and spoke. That's how at least we saw it. Then marketplace came in where website no longer had one or two large warehouses, but they would request us to go and collect from, say, 300 or 500 pickup points spread across, say, 7 cities. So that required a tweaking of the supply chain model. Then as the network complexity evolved, the sort complexity went up. So the problem moved from first mile as a big bottleneck to line haul as the big bottleneck. Then the industry further evolved to having a first mile visibility, because initially there was maybe 3, 5, 10 e-commerce companies, and we had slowly onboarded the long tail, people who were shipping 5 parcels a day, 3 parcels a day. People, the companies like Dog Spots, uh, HUFT. I can talk about a lot of these early stage clients who were literally building while we were also building. And we realized that if we only service the top 2, 3, we will not really be able to build the ecosystem. So we tried to build infra to service 10,000 plus clients. And that is a much more complex problem, because the parcels look different, they're packaged differently, the damage kind of issue, I remember a very famous situation where we were shipping pickles, and one bottle of pickle destroyed goods worth more than 5-6 lakh rupees in a single consignment, right? And these kind of issues, obviously, there are insurances to go, and there are learnings that you can figure out along the way. But the network kept evolving. Then there was a time where e-commerce had so much acceptability that the companies were now driving efficiency. So they said, we don't really want to do air shipping. We are okay with surface shipping. We want, since you're already doing transportation for us, why don't you start doing warehousing for us? Once you start doing warehousing, it's not the traditional warehousing, right? It's actually like Amazon coined the term fulfillment center, wherein you're mapping individual workflows, you're mapping the floor movement of a picker, floor movement of a guy who's going and placing the items on the shelves. In the same rack, in the same box, you are placing goods owned by 2 or maybe 10 different merchants, right? So the level of complexity of uh, and the amount of data you need to manage to make sure that not a single parcel goes out wrongly. If I'm going to pick up a pen drive, say a Kensington pen drive, I cannot pick up a pen drive from a different merchant, right? It may look the same, but it has to have the exact same QR code which get packed, and I don't have to waste time looking for that particular. So a lot of interesting, numerous mathematical problems or operational problems is what we sort of built over the years, and the problems kept evolving as the scale changed, as the uh, and I think this has been true almost every year. Every year, delivery has been a different business, a different company. Uh, yeah, I think broadly that's what talking about the how the model has evolved over the years.
Very interesting, Bhavesh, and great to hear all that. Along with me are Srujana and Vaibhav from the E-Cell of IIMC. This is a student club on entrepreneurship. So now I pass on the questions to them. So in the next part of the interview, they will be asking you more questions about delivery and other things. Thank you. I will see you at the end.
Yeah. Thank you, Bhavesh sir, for this insightful information on delivery. So I just had one question, like as delivery was evolving, so there were like operational challenges that you mentioned. So like how did these challenges shifted over time? And also like what significant business transformation did you experience in terms of like new players coming in to the market, like or like even the international players also coming in the Indian market? And how did you use the technology for that matter to shape and influence those changes? Yeah.
Sure. So I think I'll probably mix the 3 questions and try and answer them in bits and pieces. So obviously, like I said, right, initially, I remember the first week, you know, I was at we had 2 delivery hubs at the time, two delivery centers, with maybe about staffing of about 6 to 8 at each location. And I had a discussion with Sahil. I said, why don't you go and look at some routing algorithms to deploy in these places? I went there, and I show up at 7 in the morning. The delivery boy supposed to come at 9, comes in at 11. His bag is already ready by then. He's going out for his delivery run. He's taken 20 parcels, comes back at 1 o'clock, and he says that, sir, I'm a little tired. I don't feel very good. He's delivered 2 parcels, right, out of the 20 that he was supposed to take. And my first thought was that no routing algorithms will work here, right? this is truly a people's problem at this stage. So I really got into the nuts and bolts of driving discipline, driving a culture of accountability. And this was true across all five founders. All of us were grappling with this because at a very early stage, when you're a very small business, your employees are not looking at this as a career or as a long-term place. They're looking at this more like, in a couple of months, I'll be here until I find another better job. So changing their mindset and holding them accountable was a big part of the early years, right? And I remember till date, uh, each founder would have individually delivered more than 10,000 parcels, and we have done this from day one. After all the delivery boys would go out for their delivery, we would then, with all the remaining leftover parcels, individually we would take and we would go out and do our own delivery runs as founders. And starting from that, as the business scaled, we started facing strikes in some locations. We had bought the initial few vehicles, the Maruti Ecos, were purchased by the company. Within a year and a half of operating these, some of the tires were missing, engine components were missing. So all of these different problems were actually a full business in itself, right? When uh, we started, for example, reverse logistics, we realized that this requires a dedicated fleet of its own. A delivery boy who's going out with 20-30 parcels may not be equipped or may not be trained to do reverse logistics on the way back, right? And this was a time when customers would just give products back in unused, in semi-used condition, and we wouldn't know where to, how to. This wasn't a time where you could tell an e-commerce customer that, please pack it in a box and put a shipping label on it, and only then we will collect it. Uh, so then, of course, as the network became more complex, uh, how do we do intercity movement of goods, right? So for the longest time, there's something called mother bags. In Hindi, we call them boras, right? So these mother bags were used to ship goods. Now, how do you pack them, right? You can stitch them, or you can just seal them with a plastic seal. Now, this plastic seal has we initially bought them in bulk, and we saw that mobile phones were suddenly, somebody was opening these, taking out a mobile phone and putting a new seal. So then we realized, okay, we need to put unique uh, numbers to these seals. Uh, what is the right size for these mother bags? What is the right shape? India never had a company. If you think about it, I mean, when we started, 98% consignments of Blue Dart were documents, right? So small and express parcel delivery was never there was no real company doing this, right? So therefore, we didn't even have any large scale conveyor belt sortation systems in our country at the time. The only parcel sorter was deployed by India Post in 2 locations in the country. And these were document sorters. So very narrow conveyor belts with very low weight, with handwritten text on them, right? So the business problem was very different. Dealing with our clients were also all new age companies. They were also companies which were still figuring out how to make their business work, right? So sometimes they would give us shipments which had barcodes which are not readable at all, and they would give us 50 lakh worth of mobile phones with unreadable barcodes, right? One mobile phone goes missing. That's, for us, it was make or break at the time, right? I remember the first phone we had lost, somebody had stolen it, and we could trace the IMEI to somewhere in Bhatinda, and it was 8 in the night. And I told these guys that, look, I'm going to Bhatinda on the bike. And my co-founder like, look, it's good to be crazy, but not this crazy, right? We can let go of one mobile phone. But that was the level of fear we were living with, right? Every parcel matters. It is okay to be a little late in the worst case scenario, weather, roads, accidents, all kinds of things happen, right? But stealing or losing a parcel was, we had certain behaviors called red line behaviors, right? So you would immediately get a sort of either a suspicion, a letter of suspension, or a notice saying that, this is your first strike, and that any further deviation, and you will be held accountable, essentially, right? Then as further the business scaled, that one of the big complexities, moving from air shipping to surface. Air shipping itself was a very tough industry to deal with. And when I talk about industry transformation, this was an industry which was completely operated through agents. Airlines looked down upon cargo as a business. Cargo was always an afterthought for a very long time. And there was no visibility. So if I, in the early years, 80 to 90% of e-commerce goods that were getting delivered to end customers were moving through some cargo bill, some aeroplane, so say SpiceJet, Jet Airways or Indigo, it would move with the passenger cargo, right? So say typical cargo hold is 6 tons, couple of tons you earmark for the fuel, remaining 4 tons. Out of that, 2 tons is passenger cargo. The leftover 2 tons is what would be on sale, and agents would typically market this. Now, because of this, if we put unique labels on each bag, the airline would say, no, we cannot scan this. We cannot give which bags have been received, which bags have been shipped. So there would be times where, there would be a rolling delay of 10 bags, which would show up 3 days later. And then we would keep telling them, look, it would be faster for me to take this by road, the pace at which you are giving this to us. So for them, we kept showing that, your industry can grow massively if you just create some visibility. Airport is a stakeholder. The government is a stakeholder. The security agencies are a stakeholder. Airline, of course, is a stakeholder. And we, the shipper, are the final stakeholder. We are the primary here, right? But because of these stakeholders, they could never come up with a system which would make things faster, more visible, and easier to operate. So eventually we realized that, but e-commerce customers want reliability. You told me parcel is going to come in on 15th. Why is it not here on 15th? Right? So we said, can we move a certain percentage of goods from air to surface? Also, if you look at the time, it was about 120 rupees to ship a parcel. If we have to bring this down, 60 rupees out of this was actually line haul cost. So if we can scale the line haul cost down by 30 or 40 rupees, that would be a significant saving overall for everybody in the value chain. So we said, let's do surface. How do you do surface, right? So then now you're looking at understanding the road networks of the country, what are the kind of TATs, and then you realize that so one industry that we truly saw transform was the airship. From those days, today airlines directly have contracts with us, long-term price contracts, long-term commitments in terms of what aircraft, what tonnage is available to each individual player, and it's a dynamic pricing. There is fixed long-term contracts. So it's a fairly nuanced and a very evolved industry today. But from there to, and we could push this transformation because at one point we became 5 or 7% of the industry volume, right? So they no longer had a choice but to listen to us. On the surface side, when we started out, the average distance a truck did in our country was about 7,000 kilometers a month. Today we have a fleet, not just delivery owned. We have a lot of partners who have long-term contracts again with us, who operate more than 100 to even 500 trucks with delivery as a single partner. The way these guys evolved is, we said we want to sweat the asset more, which means not drive faster, but the truck has to keep moving. So you either have multiple drivers part of the same truck, or you do small relays. I think Rivigo Trucks First was one of the first companies which came up with a relay model in the country. This is a model which exists worldwide in a lot of countries and fairly successful. The goal was, if I can do Delhi Bombay in 24 hours, my effective TAT either through air or through surface stays the same, right? So there's massive cost saving. There is massive improvement in visibility. Pilferage goes down considerably because it's now all of it is within my network. Everything is under CCTV coverage all throughout. But operating a large fleet was not something that we had done successfully previously, right? So figuring, and there, I think, again, B School case studies came to help. There are a lot of case studies on how FedEx built FedEx Ground, which was the most profitable business line for them back then. And, we literally tried to learn from that playbook and implement large parts of it in different areas. And one of the key things we had learned through the airline industry was that to be able to drive the market, you need to have a certain percentage of the assets with you. So we said, we'll not set up our own fleet full-fledgedly, but there will always be 5 or 10% of the fleet that will be operated and owned by us. So we understand the costs, we understand the challenges, and that we are also able to push the partner to the level of efficiency that we want, which is a sustainable but a reasonable level. I think, like I mentioned, that 7,000 number came up to 20 to 25,000 kilometers a month, right? And that is less than what a number of our vehicles. I think recently we were again we were the first company in the country to introduce the large Volvo trailers, right? And we were questioned by everybody in the industry saying that you guys are ruining the industry, you're spoiling the cost structure, this doesn't work, this doesn't make economic sense. But credit to the team, we have some amazingly smart, very capable people who run various different parts of delivery, and they stuck to their guns. They had the numbers to back it up, and today I think everybody else is now also doing it after us having one of the largest Volvo fleets in the country. How did technology influence? So I think that has been probably one of the biggest disruptors, simply because I can talk about driving a culture of honesty, driving a culture of accountability, but without technology to monitor people at every step, it is very hard to find out, do root cause analysis and solve problems for building systems. Systems drive people, right? And that builds scale. If you start depending on people, then it's a recipe for disaster, right? Every time somebody gets sick, has a problem, has a we've had team leaders using COD money to get their sisters married, right? Or even IPL season, they start betting in IPL, and we've taken very strict action against such people. We have again so we were one of the first people to invest heavily in security, probably one of the largest and most respected security teams in the country, which is again supremely tech savvy, right? They were one of the first users of AI within the company, in terms of they're one of the budget, so they have extensively done tests on tracking systems which use various kinds of sensors, CCTV monitoring, large control rooms where thousands of cameras are being monitored by armies of people around the country. All of this has been possible because I think the focus was always use technology to solve a problem first. Depend on people. The people are the ones who drive the systems, but give them the right tools so that they are able to do only the value add work, right? Not one simple example, right? When we started LTL, we went to these LTL facilities of the traditional brick and mortar companies, and we saw that the other companies that were sitting, when you're operating out of a large warehouse, typically as a courier partner, you put an implant in their facility. So all the other listed companies had an implant there, and these guys would they had to print 600 labels for 600 boxes and paste them on each box, right? For this process they had 6 people. Just by making a few changes in the sticker generation software, we could do the same amount of work in half the time with 2 people, right? So effectively we were able to do it in 1/6 amount of effort just by using better software processes, right? And this was these kind of things were always possible because again, over the years, initially obviously the ideation in terms of what should be built, what should be changed on the software side was driven through founders, through the early leaders, through the early VPs, directors that we had in the supply chain team. But over time, we said that can we take the product manager approach to solving this problem, wherein a product manager is closely looking at every process and trying to understand what the workflow here, right? So planning and engineering is a team which works with operations. They are the people who do time and motion studies, who will figure out, okay, there are fundamental gaps in productivity in a certain location. Using input from them, a product manager would come up with a better UI, a better workflow, which would then bring in such a drastic change in the overall productivity. Like every, in the early years, we would launch a new version of the software, and our service levels would go up by 5 to 8% within 2 weeks. That's a massive jump for not a single extra. I mean, other than obviously the tech capex is there, but not a single extra rupee spent on operations. If I can make a change of 8 to 10% in the service levels, I can start charging 20% extra margins for that, right? So I think tech has been the fundamental driver for all change at Delhivery.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Like, yeah, Sujana has another question for you now.
Um, yes, sir. Could you like briefly tell us about how different is delivery now and from what your first envisaged? And also, can you tell me a little about how IIM Calcutta has shaped you as an entrepreneur? And do you remember something, some memories that you can share with me from IIM Calcutta that helped you with all this?
So the business, a lot of the things that we started over the years were more driven by client needs, wherein a client would come in and say that, can you please do this? You're doing XYZ for me, but that's not enough. And I cannot give you more business if you don't do ABC. Right. And that is what has driven all the different new things that we built, all the way from reverse LTL, FTL, large parts of warehousing, the hybrid flash offering that we have. So, but what has happened is over the years, as founders, we have been very conscious in terms of how actively we want to drive the business, right? And that's also because of the things that we have learned. I mean, 3 of my co-founders have worked at Bain and Company. 2 of us have, one is IIM Calcutta, one is IIM Bangalore. The Kapil has spent almost a decade at Sapient in leadership roles. So we all come from places where we understand that to truly achieve scale and to build defensible systems, you need to learn to delegate and build processes and systems which override people, right? So as founders, we have to take a step back. So that has probably for me been one of the biggest changes that I've seen over the years, where more and more decisions are being driven at various levels and by people who otherwise I would not. I mean, earlier, you are an extreme micromanager, you are trying to literally decide, when should somebody breathe, right? Coming from that to today, where the approach is everything is done through reviews, everything is done through systems. So it's a very different company that ways. The culture still remains the same. I think there is still if the one thing that I used to tell everybody at Delhivery was that even at 25-30,000 employees, we still work like one team. We don't work like departments. I've worked at large workplaces. I would typically see that departments would always be at loggerheads. The goal would not be to solve the problem. The goal would be to make sure that how does my department not get affected by this, right? And that I think we have been very conscious to drive that culture, that let's solve the problem. There will be consequences on everybody. We have to figure out what works best, right? So I think that culture has stayed intact. Obviously, we started as an e-commerce enabler. Over the years, we become more of an end-to-end supply chain business, serving the needs of domestic as well as some of our international partners. So we didn't really, I mean, none of us in the wildest dreams thought that this is what we are going to build. This was not the goal. This was never, this is all, I think we were able to bring the right amount of craziness and the right amount of energy while giving space to each other to build. 5 founders is always a very large founding team. 5 founders with nobody in logistics background, building a business which is traditionally considered a blue collar business. is not a recipe which typically leads to something like Delhivery, right? So I think we've been very fortunate, and I think, but also with that comes a lot of responsibility, and that's how all of us see it today. My time at Joka has been probably one of the most transformative 2 years, obviously, needless to say. I had such amazing faculty. I mean, I'm sure you guys have too. And Professor Balram was my teacher back then. He's the only one from my time that I could meet this time around when I was on campus. 80% of what we were taught was going above us back then. It is only when you do things in the real world that you realize, oh wow, this makes sense. I think for me, some of the things that I learned from Professor Ashok Banerjee have stuck and have helped me think through building the sides of the when I was actually rolling out the ERP, for example, how to drive accountability, how to build finance systems. When we were doing our numerous fundraisers, at least when I had to give my inputs, it would be through my lessons in Crest. At least, I mean, what we learned in those two courses under Professor Banerjee would probably take you at least 20 years in banking, in investment banking. At least that was my take, because over the years I've seen numerous. I mean, all of us spent time on CNBC and all the other different finance news, and the kind of things we are able to pick up, we've been very fortunate, right? That's how at least I see it. That I was an avid footballer. I made a lot of friends. How to make sure people show up on time. I think that's a big problem with the kind of things that keep happening on camp. I remember, I mean, I used to count the number of weekends that, okay, on this particular weekend there are 3 workshops. On this particular weekend there are 2 events. It was never that there was one. There was never a free weekend, of course, but you always had to choose what you can attend. And this was, you're talking about a weekend, not a weekday, right? I didn't smoke on campus. I know, I mean, this is a little funny, but what I realized is that because we had breaks between lectures, and if you wanted to sort of mingle with the crowd, you had to, they all smoke, right? So what I did was, okay, I can't smoke, but I started guessing which brand of cigarette this is. So I started figuring out, and I became very good at it. I could literally tell, okay, this is King's, this is Mild, this is etc. And I think that is one thing that I remember with some joy. The campus was, of course, very beautiful. I had a lake view room. So, and especially during rains, the lightning would be so severe that it would literally feel like the world is about to end. And it would actually make you think. I mean, I had a lot of friends who were FP students. So, numerous countless late night interactions with them would also help me push to think about life. It was not just about, you go in thinking that, I'm going to learn business, and, I'm going to learn. In my head, I thought I wanted to be an entrepreneur. That's why I'm going to IIM Calcutta. I think in my second year, Professor Sanjeev Vaidya burst that bubble, saying that, we don't train you to be an entrepreneur. We train you how not to be an entrepreneur, right? And those were very wise words. Actually, while building Delhivery, that was one thing I would keep going back to, saying that, I don't want to decide like an entrepreneur at this stage. This is the point where I want to decide like a manager. And from this point onwards, only a manager will take these kind of decisions. I will not decide on these things anymore. But that was because of those lessons that stuck with me, I think, over the years. So yeah, I'm sure there are a lot of other things that I remember and I can talk about. But I think this is good for today.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir.
Great, Bhavesh. It was a fantastic interview that you have given, and I'm very grateful on behalf of IIM Calcutta CI as well as your alma mater, IIM Calcutta. And it goes without saying, we are extremely proud of you as alumnus of this place. And we wish you all the best and further success in your career or journey, entrepreneurial journeys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. It's been an honor.